a culture's perception of what it means to be understood as a male or a female. And then we spoke of feminism, which I said was a political term. It was a political bid, to acquire equality, to accomplish equality between men and women. And then I said that over the years, we realized that, the developments which have taken place after the Second World War, we realized that we have given up the idea that there are only two genders. So we have come into an understanding, we have come to a better understanding of gender, and we have dismissed and dispensed with the idea that there are just two genders to choose from, male and female. And we realize now that there is a diversity of genders, and apart from male and female, we term them together as the third gender. And as I said, that the very name third gender also has certain discriminatory tendencies associated with it. Why third? Because third would be a chronological category, which would mean that there is someone which is the first gender, and then there is someone which is the second gender, and then there is the third gender. So in terms of power, in terms of socio-cultural privilege, obviously we know who the first gender is. We know that the first gender is the male and the second gender is the female, and the third gender is the other. So anyways, maybe in times to come, as I said, we will do away with this kind of a classification, with this kind of a stratification, with this kind of a hierarchical ordering of genders. However, for the time being, we have accepted the term third gender. And so feminism, as I said, has merged broadly with the field of what we call gender studies, where feminism is not just talking about equality between men and women, it is talking about the equality of all genders. So all genders should be equal in the eyes of law, in the eyes of culture, in the eyes of society, in the eyes of religion. So every privilege, which one gender has should also be accessible to the other genders, and there should be no discrimination on the grounds of gender. So this is the basic idea that gender theory or feminist theory espouses, that there should be no discrimination on grounds of gender. So what does feminism do? What does feminist criticism do? Feminist criticism, to begin, the first thing that feminist criticism does is that it tries to read existing texts which already exist, texts most of which have been authored by men. So it tries to examine these texts in order to inquire, in order to find out, that why should men be talking about, what womanhood means. So if you read Virginia Woolf's essay of one's essay on A Room of One's Own, you realize that Woolf has been asked to give a lecture. The essay begins with the idea that the writer has been invited to give a lecture on women writers. She has been invited to talk about women writers in fiction, and she is researching. She is researching for her lecture, and in the process of researching for her lecture, she realizes that why is there just a handful of women authors? Because at the time when Virginia Woolf is writing, she's writing in the early 20th century. So who are the most popular female authors who have just which whom we see in the last century? So of course female authorship begins to acquire some kind of attention, probably with Jane Austen. Jane Austen, I think, is the first woman novelist to acquire some kind of respectable attention. Now, before that, you had a few Gothic writers, among which there were women. They were Gothic writers. You have Elizabeth Gaskell, and there are a few more writers who became quite commercially popular during their times. But still, the idea of the female pen and female authorship as acquiring respect, I think, is first visible with Jane Austen. And then you have, just a second, just a second. Yes. So you see, the idea of, as I said, female authorship begins to acquire some respect, some prestige with Jane Austen coming on the scene. And then following Jane Austen, you have other writers. For example, you have Mary Shelley, who is writing Frankenstein again in the early 19th century. And then you have the Bronte sisters, you have, the three sisters, all of them who have written one wonderful novel each. And then you have George Eliot, who comes in the Victorian period. So, Virginia Woolf, when she wants to talk about women writers in fiction, she realizes that for, I think, maybe 1,000 male writers, there would be just one female writer. So she is very, she wants to know why there should be such a gender discrepancy as far as writing is concerned. And that is where, her quest begins, her journey begins. She tries to answer this question, that why should we have such few female writers, whereas there are so many men writing? And that leads her, to question. And when she is in the process of doing her research, and she goes to the library and she comes across books, she says that she is looking for books on women, and therefore she looks at the catalog, which is marked W, because she needs books on women. And when she looks at the catalog marked W, she says that there are a host of titles, there are a host of book titles which include the word woman in their title. So it is woman or women. So there are thousands and thousands of book titles which include the word woman or women. And Virginia Woolf realizes that almost all these titles are authored by men. So men, have been writing about women. It is men who have laid down the idea of how a woman should be perceived. It is men who have set down the markers of what good femininity is as opposed to bad femininity. So these are things which have been so far decided by men, is what feminist criticism believes. So feminism, it looks for ideologies, particularly it looks for patriarchal ideologies, which are embedded in literary texts, which are embedded in the idea of form, in the idea of characterization, in the language of the text. So one important thrust area of feminist criticism would be to read texts from a gender perspective, and to find out, what are the values that are being promoted or upheld in a text, and how are these values detrimental to the idea of the equality between men and women. So this is one thrust area of feminist criticism. The other thrust area of feminist criticism, of course, is to develop theories, is to develop ideas which will, promote a sense of female authorship. So there are feminists who believe that the entire arena of language has become tainted, has become corrupt with the ideology of patriarchy. Because, of course, when we talk about power, we realize that the group which is in power at any point of time in a society, in a culture, in a nation, it is that group which kind of, regulates, which kind of scripts, which kind of makes the language of a society. So लैंग्वेज कंस्ट्रक्ट करने का, लैंग्वेज को अपने आइडियोलॉजी से कलर करने का, ये जो पावर है, ये सिर्फ डोमिनेंट ग्रुप के पास होता है, जो भी कोई ग्रुप डोमिनेंट हो, whether we talk it out in terms of gender, whether we talk it out in terms of say caste, whether we talk it out in terms of religion, whether we talk it out in terms of race. तो जो भी कोई ग्रुप हो, जो भी कोई पावर ग्रुप हो, जो भी ग्रुप हो जिसके पास उस वक्त पावर है, लिंग्विस्टिक डोमिनेशन है ना, कोई भी फील्ड हो, यू रियलाइज दैट लैंग्वेज इज यूज्ड to reflect the ideology of that dominant group. So हम लोग ये मानकर चलते हैं that language is not a neutral medium, which, as we have discussed before, structuralism and post-structuralism and deconstruction, they have all told us that language is not a neutral medium. And language is already always colored with ideology. So there are ideas which are built into language. There are ideas which you cannot take out from language unless you completely dismantle and rebuild the language itself. So without dismantling and rebuilding a particular language, you cannot take out the ideas, the cultural ideas that have been, embedded within its structures. So this is another important arena of feminist criticism, that feminist criticism tries to construct alternative models. It is trying to do away with the existing models of literary criticism, which has more or less been a male dominated area again. Most theorists are males, and most theories, they have a patriarchal base to them. And feminism, the first thing, as I said, that feminism is doing is that it is trying to read texts in a new way. It is trying to read the old text, the existing text, in a new way, so as to question, the power hierarchy in the text. It is trying to question as to why, there should be a gender imbalance in the text. And if there is a gender imbalance, it is trying to draw the attention of the reader to this, that look, this is not a text which you should, consume without questioning. So these are the gaps in the text. These are the dissonances in the text. ये यहाँ पर text में ये बातें खटकती हैं, and therefore these are the things that should, draw your attention, and these are the things that you should try to critically question within a particular text. And as I said, the second idea of feminist criticism is to build alternative canons, alternative theories, alternative principles through which, we can judge texts in a new light. तो अगर हम ये मानते हैं कि अब तक की जितनी सारी जो तरीके हैं टेक्स्ट को व्यू करने के, अगर उनमें जेंडर बायस है, तो इस जेंडर बायस को हम एक नए तरीके से कैसे ओवरकम करें? हाउ डू वी कम अप विथ न्यू आइडियाज which will help us, which will promote female authorship, and which will remove the gender bias that is there in the understanding and in the interpretation and in the meaning making out of literature. Okay, so these are the two aims, these are the two targets of feminist criticism. And as I was talking in the last class, we find that feminism comes to us in what we call as waves. The idea of the wave, that a wave would be a movement. So we can see, and as I said, feminism is not something new. It is not as if it emerged right in the 19th century with the women suffragettes. No, it was an inquiry, it was a questioning which had been going along for a long period of time. But until, men began to participate in this. The feminist movement did not acquire momentum till men began to participate in it. So you have the earlier phases of feminism, where, as I said, even in the Middle Ages, you have nuns, who are questioning the patriarchal practices of the church, who are talking about the lower status which has been accorded to women in the Christian religion, and who are, writing against it, who are questioning it, who are questioning the logicality of this so-called inferior status. So there have been, there have been no dearth of critical questions put forward by women. But somehow these questions have always been kind of sidelined. They have always been kind of pushed under the carpet. And such names, such very, very rebellious names of women nuns and such other important noble women, they have not been much publicized. So of course there are books. For example, there is a book, I think, by Margaret Walters, A Short Introduction to Feminism, or Feminism, A Short Introduction, something like that. I think, yes, Feminism, a very short introduction, by Margaret Walters. It will give you an excellent account of the development of feminism right from the beginning, when feminism grew up under the fold of the church. So as I said, this was always there. This questioning tendency was always there. There have been many noble women belonging to the aristocratic strata of society in the Elizabethan period, in the early 17th century, in the early 18th century, who have questioned this subservient status which has been accorded to women. But as I said, it is not until men began to openly, promote women's causes that this movement came about. So you realize that at in the early 19th century, you had a number of male intellectuals who were, agitating or who were in some ways trying to raise their voices for the case of women. So you have James Stuart Mill, who was an important philosopher of the 19th century, and James Stuart Mill is talking about the need to emancipate women. He is talking about the need to give legal recourses to women, and there should be an equality for women under the eyes of law. So these are ideas that are being raised by John Stuart Mill in the period. And then you have George Bernard Shaw, you had Karl Marx himself, and there were a number of other, intellectuals, male intellectuals, who were speaking in favor of the women's cause. So maybe because of the efforts of all of these, people put together, there was a massive rise of protest in the later part of the 19th century, and you realize that this protest grows on to become stronger and stronger in the early 20th century, finally bringing about the women's suffragette movement. So women are finally allowed the right to vote. And this comes at the end, because as I said, initially voting rights belonged only to the upper class white male. So you had the upper class, the aristocratic class, the landed class, who had the right to cast a vote. And then by the second reform bill, the suffragette was extended to the middle class, and then you had the third reform bill by which it was extended to the working class. But still, it was only the males who were allowed the right to vote. So the women had a long history of struggle till they were finally, granted voting rights in the early 20th century. You realize perhaps that we are better off in India that way, that our constitution began, with acknowledging the rights of women. So legally, with the birth of India as a nation, which took place after the birth of our constitution, women have been women have been given a constitutional status. And so I think in India we are better off in that way, that we did not have that long history of women's suffragette behind us. But yes, in the West it has been a long time coming. And you finally realize that what we know as first wave feminism, it culminated, it ended with the granting of the suffragette. So the first wave feminism could be seen to extend roughly from, say, the middle of the 19th century to the early part of the 20th century, when women's suffragette was granted. So almost, say, from the early 19th to the mid 20th century, the Second World War. After the Second World War, you see the rise of a new tendency in feminism, which we call the second wave of feminism. So the second wave was defined by writers like, you must have heard of the book, The Second Sex by Simone de Beauvoir. The Second Sex was a very important book which crafted the journey of the feminist movement. And it begins with a very startling sentence that one is not born a woman, one becomes a woman. It's a very it's an oft quoted statement, and it's a very startling statement for a book to begin with, particularly if you look at the time in which it was written. So Simone de Beauvoir, she says, she was a French writer, and she says that one is not born a woman, one becomes a woman. Now look at it. What is she trying to say? You're not born a woman, which means that biologically, you can be born female. But then in society, what passes for woman is what you are not born with, but what you are forced to become. So somehow Beauvoir believes that it is, socialization which leads to the production of women. She, engenders the idea that woman is a construct. She's a social construct. One is not born a woman. Woman is not natural. Rather, she is constructed by society. Now, Beauvoir, she talks about ideas which have already been raised before by other feminists, notably Mary Wollstonecraft in the earlier 19th century. She had written a document vindicating the rights of women, and there Wollstonecraft was also raising similar issues. For example, Wollstonecraft says that you look at the upbringing, you look at the difference in the upbringing of boys and girls. And will be allowed to run open, they will be allowed to run wild, and that kind of freedom, grants them a suppleness, grants them a health, which will in turn build a stronger individual. Whereas girls, from the very beginning, they are taught to stay indoors, they are taught to play with toys, they are taught all kinds of sitting games. You play with your tea sets and cup sets and whatnot, you play with the dolls. So they are discouraged from climbing trees and from any kind of harsh so-called harsh game, which will require a lot of running around. So from a very young age, girls are taught to are forced to kind of suppress a part of themselves. So naturally, people who will keep sitting will not become very healthy individuals, and this will later on reflect in their biological structure. So boys will naturally become very active and virile and healthy, and girls will naturally, become very weak and fragile and delicate. And then later on, society will say that yes, women are delicate and women cannot do as much work as men because they are weak. So these are ideas that Wollstonecraft had also raised. When she talks about women's education, she says that you do not give women an education, and later on you will say that women do not have the intellectual ability to study mathematics. So on the one hand, you don't teach them anything, and on the other, you complain that they're not capable of learning anything. You do not teach them at the age when they should learn. So at the age when they should learn, you are getting them married, or you are teaching them embroidery, or you are teaching them housekeeping skills. And then of course, when they are grown up, it is difficult for them to understand such basic concepts that they should have learned when they were maybe 5 or 6. So later on, when they are unable to absorb all that, you say that women have an inferior intellect, they have a weak intellect, and therefore they are incapable of this, and this. So Mary Wollstonecraft had also raised similar ideas, and you find that Simone de Beauvoir is kind of she's reiterating these ideas, and she's doing it in a more comprehensive way. And she's also talking about how from birth to death, the idea of women is configured, the idea of women is enmeshed in the male discourses. So it is men who decide how a good daughter should be, how a little girl child should be, and then how an adolescent girl should be, and then how a wife should be, and then how a mother should be, and then how an old woman should be, or how a widow should be. So these are ideas which are not natural. These are constructed by society, and the progenitors of these ideas, the builders of these ideas, are all men. And this is what we have to break. We cannot keep on living our lives according to the way that people expect us to live. There has to be something natural. If it is my life, I have to have a say in it, and I will decide and choose what kind of a life I want for myself, rather than conforming to a particular model which has been set up in front of me. Okay, so the second wave of feminism, it emphasized. So whereas the first wave of feminism had tried to talk about equality, they had tried to say that men and women may be biologically different, but they are equal. They should be granted equality. Both of them have the ability to do all kinds of things, and therefore it is, though there is a difference, but there should be equality. This was what the first wave of feminism had stood for. We find that in the second wave, there are feminists who take a retreat from this, and they say that no, we do not demand equality from you because we are not equal. Fine, there is a difference in our biological makeup, and this difference in our biological makeup also accounts for the difference in our intellectual and artistic makeup, in our intellectual and creative makeup. So it is not possible for us to say that men and women are equal. We cannot say that we are equal. We are different, and we are of course maybe better than you. So the second wave of feminism is trying to push that forward and say that no, we are different and we are better in our difference. And so they set up all kinds of all kinds of alternative metaphors in order to establish the difference of the difference of women. And of course the basic site, the basic sphere, the basic space in which they root their difference is the sphere of the human body. So you will find that these feminists of the second wave, particularly the French feminists, Helen Sixou and Lucy Irigaray and Julia Kristeva, they're using a lot of body metaphors in order to talk about women's experiences. So they say that because women have the power to produce children, because they are capable of procreation, because they have a kind of body which allows them to reenact the parts of God. So because women are very creative biologically, therefore naturally they are also creative intellectually, and their creativity would be of a different order from that of male creativity. So now these are of course things which we can debate upon. We are just talking about facts, things which have been said. So the second wave feminists, they pushed forward the idea of difference, and they said that yes, we are different, we are content to be different, we do not want to be like men. So the first generation feminists had wanted to show that they can be like men, so they would put on men's dresses, and they would try to do the jobs that could be done by men to show that yes, they had equal physical prowess. But you find that the second wave feminists, they beat a retreat and say that no, we do not want to be like men, we cannot be like men, we're not interested in being like you, because of course we are very different from you, and it is this difference that they want to capitalize upon. And then you find that you have the third wave of feminism. The third wave of feminism comes, say, in the uh, uh, late 20th and then the early 21st century. You have the third wave of feminism. The third wave of feminists believe that feminism again is no homogeneous term. You cannot say that so and so is a feminist, or feminism means so and so. So they argue that there can be a variety of feminisms. So the third wave feminists refuse to define the term feminism, and they argue for a variety of feminisms. So these third wave feminists, you realize that the third wave of feminism begins with the advocacy of black feminism, of the black feminist movement. And in India, you have the Dalit feminist movement. So these were women, the blacks in, say, Europe and America. They said that we are also women, but the circumstances of our life are very, very different from that of white women. So the white woman, when she's talking about feminism, she's only talking about herself. She is not including us. So the black woman has a different kind of socio-cultural economic history as compared to the white woman. And what would qualify as, as freedom for the white woman would not equally qualify as freedom for the black woman. The things that the white woman is empowered to do, the black woman may not be empowered to do those same things. So the black women feel that the idea of feminism has kind of marginalized them from the discourse. They are also women, and yet feminism does not take into account the experiences of their life. So the realization that there may be, again, similarly, women from India have also rejected the European model of feminism. And they say that, no, in India, it will not work, because in India, we have a different kind of, cultural structure. Patriarchy is ingrained so deep, and there is such a variety. There is so much heterogeneity in the experiences of women. The experiences of women are not uniform. So women from the Brahmanical class will have very different experiences from women belonging to the lower classes. Again, women belonging in urban social spaces will have different experiences from women belonging to rural social spaces. So there is a lot of heterogeneity, and feminism should take into account this heterogeneity. We should not insist on one brand of feminism and say that feminism means this. So we have to realize that there can be as many feminist practices as there are women. So even silence can sometimes be a feminist practice. It is not as if you are always expected to come out into the streets with placards and candles and rebel. Sometimes silence also can be a very, very important tool to kind of voice your protest. So the idea that feminism stands for this and nothing beyond this is the kind of idea that you realize that the third wave feminists reject, and they stand for a multiplicity of feminisms. And you have all these various feminisms, the black feminist movement, Dalit feminist movement. You have the black womanism, the idea of womanism rather than feminism, which all comes under, which all comes under third wave feminism. Now, there are many feminists who say that we have entered a phase which you can call the fourth wave feminism. Now, this fourth wave feminism has particularly become very popular because of the increasing popularity of virtual spaces. It has been facilitated by, the ICT. So you have social media, and social media is a very important tool for communication. It is also a very important tool for creating and fostering networks, identity networks, right? So if I am sitting here, in a remote part of India, I can form networks with people who are sitting, in various parts across the world. I can get my stories across to them, and they can get their stories across to me, and we can build a kind of community and a consensus. And the possibility of success that this kind of a movement has was evident in the success of the Me Too movement. So you realize how, allegations against a particular director in the USA led to a worldwide movement across all parts of the world, where women from all fields of art, come to the forefront and say how and when they have been abused by their male colleagues or their male seniors. And this has sparked, legal interest. Almost every nation now, United Nations, has set standards for, making inquiries into these. So the fourth wave feminism, which is not exactly done, which is not exactly a done thing. There are critics who say that we are living the fourth wave now. So fourth wave feminism is about this. It is about, the alliance of feminism with other identity groups. So there are many identity groups. As I said, you have the LGBTQ, the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual, queer identity group. So feminism is not only about women, it is about an alliance across, various gender identity groups. It is about fostering equality and respect amidst all. And this can be done now transnationally across every nation through the means of virtual networking. So fourth wave feminism is about that. We are yet, to properly explore and understand it. But yes, all around us, we see that one issue in any corner of the globe will spark movements across the world as a whole. So this is something which comes from media, and it comes from virtual media, and perhaps this has granted a greater impetus to people who are living in the margins. Okay, so this was what I wanted to say about feminism. I welcome questions on the same, and after this, we will be talking about post-colonialism. So if you have questions on feminism, you are welcome to put forward your questions. You can either type them in the chat box. Yes. Yes.
Good afternoon, ma'am. This is Shubham. This is Shubham
Yes,
from
Shubham.
Hazaribagh.
Go ahead.
I want to ask a question that does interpretation and meaning deduction of a text gets restricted or limited when we see it from a feminist theory lens or any such particular thing?
Yes, like when, I think I mentioned this before also, that any theory, I think I mentioned it yesterday, that any theory has its limitations, because you theorize on something specific, isn't it? So feminism, or say Marxism, or say post-colonialism, or say psychoanalysis, any theory will pick up a particular area which it wants to focus on, through which it wants to see the world. So every theory is a kind of window, or is a kind of lens through which you look at the world. So of course, when you look at the world through a particular set of glasses, your vision is bound to be limited, right? So if my glasses are say of a particular color, so I will see the world colored, in that perception. So this will of course limit our understanding of a text, because no text builds up with a particular agenda, that this is going to be a feminist text only, or this is going to be, say, a Dalit text only, or this is going to be, say, a white text only. So there is no text. You cannot you cannot push the meaning of a text in one direction only. So I don't think that any good text could be kind of limited within a particular sphere. But criticism, every critical theory tends to look upon the world through a particular window. So that is why I think I mentioned in one of our classes, that when you are trying to analyze a text, you should take into account a multiplicity of perspectives. Please look at it from a feminist angle also. Please look at it from, a post-colonial angle also. Please look at it from a Marxist angle also. Please look at it from the various other perspectives that are available to us. So if you just look at a text from one perspective, be it any perspective, be it feminism, be it whatever, you find that you will kind of restrict the text's meaning. So that depends upon us. Sometimes, for example, for example, if I'm doing a research, right? I'm doing a PhD and my topic is feminism. I'm doing a feminist study of say something. Then of course I will have to do that. I will have to focus on what I have decided to choose. So that is a different thing. But in your experience of reading as such, as readers, when you are reading, then I believe that you should always try to think out things from a multiplicity of perspectives. But as far as theory is concerned, yes, every theory is limited, because the theory always already makes a claim that, look, I am a feminist theory and therefore I'm trying to look at things from a gender perspective. I'm a Marxist theory and therefore I'm going to look at things from a class perspective. So theory always makes itself evident from the start. वो आपको धोखा नहीं दे रहा है, वो शुरू से आपसे कह रहा है that this is the way that I will perceive a text. This is a particular window, and from this window you can see this. ये fixed है. So now you have to use it to to kind of improve and enrich your experience as a reader. You understand, Shubha?
Yes, thank you.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am,
Yes.
just now you explained about that how women writers were criticizing in two fields. You are explaining like that. I am not remembering that. One example you gave of Virginia Woolf, who realized that on 1,000 male writers, there were only one female writer. Why it was so? So women writers were questioning. So I want to just simply ask that what were the main questions which the women writers were asking against the society. So please just repeat it against once more, ma'am.
No, like this is what Virginia Woolf sets out asking in her room of one's own, and these are the conclusion that she comes up with. So the first conclusion that she comes up with is, of course, education. Now there was a big diversity, there's a big gap in experience as far as male and female education have been concerned always historically. So you realize that women have either been denied an education. Yes, there is some disturbance on the line. So those people who have not muted themselves, kindly please mute yourselves. It will be easier for us to communicate and discuss. Yes. So you realize that for a long period of time, this has prevailed in history, that women have either been denied an education, or even when they have been given an education, the education has not been similar to that of males. So, for example, you look at George Eliot's, Middlemarch. Middlemarch is a novel by George Eliot, which entirely focuses on the idea of female education. And you realize that George Eliot is writing, of course, in the Victorian period. She's writing in the middle of the 19th century, and she tells you how the most popular subjects for women were, of course, they were taught to how to get up on a carriage and how to get down from a carriage, how to handle their Victorian gowns with so many layers and frills, and they were taught how to talk to men and how to please men so that men would get interested in them and marry them. And they were taught, of course, cooking and embroidery and making cushion covers and so on. So this was the kind of education which was supposed to be a good education for girls. So girls would be sent to finishing schools where they would be taught how to be a lady. And how to be a lady would not require the study of mathematics and science and philosophy. So how to be a lady would only require being very pretty and looking very pretty all the time, and trying to handle yourself in a way that you would be appealing to people. So this is the kind of education that girls in high societies were given. And then, of course, other society, in other societies, the middle class and the working class, girls did not have an opportunity for education. So with this kind of, gap in education, how could you have expected women to write? So this would be one thing. Then another thing you realize would be money. So women at an age, for example, Virginia Woolf says that most of the women were forced into marriage. You realize that Jane Austen is consistently in her novels, she's talking about marriage. Now, why do women need to marry? Women need to marry because how do they feed themselves, when their parents die? Because at the time that we are talking about, women did not have property rights. Women did not have property rights in the sense that if a family did not have a male child, then the property of the father would not come to the mother or the daughters. It would straight away go to the next male heir in the family. तो अगर you do not have a brother, तो फिर वो चाहे कोई भी और हो, पूरी फैमिली में, पूरी एक्सटेंडेड फैमिली में कोई भी और रिलेटिव हो, तो वो किसी और कजन को आपके पापा की प्रॉपर्टी मिल जाएगी, ना आपकी मम्मी को मिलेगी उसमें से एक पेनी, ना आपको मिलेगी। तो आप अपने खुद के फादर के प्रॉपर्टी में यू आर नॉट अ स्टेक होल्डर. Okay, women did not have property rights, so you are of course not getting anything from your family. Next, what do? You can earn your own money. So you can earn your own money. Number one, you have to have a good education. अगर आप qualified होंगे तभी आपको नौकरी मिलेगी. तो पहली बात तो आपको qualification मिल नहीं रही है. दूसरी बात है, अगर आप थोड़ा सा किसी तरह से आप मैनेज कर भी लो, थोड़ा पढ़ लिख लो, then where is the employment opportunity for women? अगर आप उस पीरियड में देखिए तो women hardly had any employment opportunity for them. या तो औरतें जनरली नर्स बनती थी, या तो फिर औरतें जो है वो गवर्नेसेस बनती थी. तो गवर्नेस और नर्स दोनों ही प्रोफेशंस को सोसाइटी जो है बहुत रिस्पेक्टेबिलिटी की निगाहों से नहीं देखती थी. सो दे वर सपोज, गवर्नेसेस एंड नर्सेस, दे वर सपोज टू बी वुमेन ऑफ क्वेश्चनेबल मॉरल वैल्यू. तो हाई सोसाइटी की औरतों को तो ये दोनों प्रोफेशंस अलाउड ही नहीं थे. And those women who resorted to these professions, they did it only because they were not getting married. So what alternative do women have to marriage? They are not educated, so they cannot be employed. Even if they manage to get some kind of education, they cannot be employed because there is no employment opportunity for them. They are not going to get any property from their parents. So where does that leave them? How do they support themselves? They have, of course, then no possibility of supporting themselves without the prospect of getting married. तो मैरिज जो है वो औरतों के लिए जरूरी हो जाती थी, क्योंकि अगर शादी नहीं करेंगी तो जिंदा कैसे रहेंगे. तो जब ऐसे में आप अपनी सर्वाइवल के बारे में बॉदर कर रहे हैं, यू डोंट नो हाउ यू विल सर्वाइव इफ यू डोंट गेट मैरिड, हाउ विल यू बिकम अ राइटर एंड हाउ विल यू बिकम समथिंग एल्स. Again, once you get married, it does not end there. You are supposed to, of course, be a mother and have children. So Jane Austen says, Virginia Woolf says that you look at the time period that is consumed in bringing one child into the world. So she says that पहले तो 9 months की pregnancy रहती है, and then after that when the child is born, the child has to be taken care of for at least 5 years before you can say that ठीक है मेरा बच्चा थोड़ा अपने आप manage कर लेता है. So almost 5 years of a woman's life are consumed in bringing up one child, and we are talking about a time when women had multiple children. वो उस जमाने की हम बात कर रहे हैं जब एक घर में 12-15 बच्चे तो बड़े कॉमन होते थे. तो अगर आप देखिए कि एक बच्चे को ब्रिंग अप करने में 5 साल लग रहे हैं, और ठीक है ओवरलैपिंग भी हैं बच्चे, फिर भी वर्जीनिया वुल्फ सेज दैट द मोस्ट प्रोडक्टिव years of a woman's life, the most intellectually fertile period of a woman's life is absorbed in childbirth, is absorbed in bringing up children, is absorbed in child care. तो फिर उसके पास वक्त कब बचता है अपनी क्रिएटिविटी को एक्सप्लोर करने का, और फिक्शन लिखने का, और पोइट्री लिखने का. So there are a number of reasons why Virginia Woolf comes to the conclusion that अच्छा इसलिए there were less women writers. And final conclusion that she comes to is of course the title of the essay itself. She says that women also did not have the privacy to write. They did not have a room of one's own. That is the title of the essay. उनके पास अक्सर ही जिस तरह की extended families में वो रहती थी, तो उनके पास अक्सर ही space नहीं होता था लिखने का. And of course, writing is something that requires a degree of freedom. You need some privacy if you want to entertain the life of the imagination. So women did not have enough money to have an independent space of their own, and within marriage they did not have enough privacy to ask for an independent space of their own. So अपने पास पैसा नहीं होना, एजुकेशन नहीं होना, और सिर्फ उनके एजुकेटेड नहीं होना नहीं, उनकी मम्मी का भी एजुकेटेड नहीं होना. अगर उनकी मम्मी एजुकेटेड रहती तो वो अपनी बेटियों को एजुकेट कराती है ना. So this is a chronic disease, this is a chronic weakness that has prevailed among womanhood. So the lack of financial resources and the lack of privacy, Virginia Woolf concludes that these are the two main reasons which have prevented women writers from coming to the forefront. Okay, these are Virginia Woolf's reasons, और काफी हद तक जो है there is no point where we can disagree with her.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have other questions? Yes, you will get recordings. The recordings are being uploaded, on the. You keep on checking the site of the Karim City College. Okay. So सो करीम सिटी कॉलेज के साइट पर आपको इग्नू का एक सेक्शन मिलेगा और उस इग्नू वाले सेक्शन में जितनी सारी लेक्चर्स हो रही हैं इस स्टडी सेंटर की तरफ से they will be uploaded there. So you keep on checking, it will be uploaded. I think my first lecture जो कि पूरी रिकॉर्ड नहीं हो पाया था because that day, the first day there were issues, you know, some technical issues. तो I think उसका 20-22 मिनट का रिकॉर्डिंग है which has been uploaded that I saw yesterday. So probably it will be a regular process and all the lectures will be uploaded. So keep checking the Karim City site. उसको subscribe कर दो. Find it out on YouTube and subscribe to the channel. तो जब कोई नया lecture होगा you will be informed about it. Okay. Yes. Are there any more questions pertaining to feminism? If not, we will go over to post-colonialism.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Yes, good afternoon.
Ma'am, myself Vishal, ma'am. How can we relate Simon in the female criticism?
How can you relate?
Simon, it is a poetess name, no, ma'am? Simon.
I do.
Simon.
Yes.
Simon.
Yes, I get you. Yes, how can you relate Simon to what?
On the basis of female criticism.
No, I do not understand your question. Could you repeat your question?
How can we relate Simon as a instructor of female criticism in our society as well?
No, you were talking about Simone de Beauvoir?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, so we spoke about her. We spoke about her contribution to criticism. We mentioned her book, The Second Sex, and we were talking about how she says that a woman is not born, she's made. So she talks about womanhood and she talks about women's lives being majorly a socio-cultural construction. Women जो थी उनके पास एक कोई नेचुरल वे नहीं था अपनी वुमनहुड एक्सप्रेस करने का. जो वेज थे वो आर्टिफिशियल थे, वो बनाए गए थे. उनको बताया गया था कि आपको ऐसे बिहेव करना है, ऐसे करना है, ऐसे करना है. So she comes to the conclusion and she begins with this, is that one is not born a woman, but from a very young age right to from birth to death, women are governed by codes of society which have been laid down by men. So the idea of womanhood, the idea of being a woman is something which has been described and kind of pre-prepared by men. So men are already telling you that this is what it means to be a woman. So a good woman should look like this, a good woman should behave like this, she should wear clothes of this nature, she should act like this, in such a situation she should do this, in such a situation she should do that. So these are things which have been laid down and we conform to those models. हम कोशिश करते हैं कि हम conform करें, हम fit in कर जाएं, और जब हम fit in करते हैं तो of course we are rewarded for that and we are told that we are very good. पर जब हम उसमें fit in नहीं करते हैं, हम ज़रूरत से ज़्यादा बोलते हैं, ज़रूरत से ज़्यादा हल्ला करते हैं, ज़रूरत से ज़्यादा freedom claim करते हैं, तो of course we are told that we are not good. So we do not fall into that category of good women. So this is what Beauvoir was trying to tell us.
Her full name was, what is her full name? Simone Beauvoir.
On the Beauvoir, French name, I have typed it out for you. Okay,
ma'am. Thank you so much.
Look at your chat box. I have typed out the name for you. Yes, good afternoon.
Ma'am, I
cannot hear you.
So my question is to you, ma'am.
Yes. Yes, of course. I'm here to answer your question.
So, ma'am, my question is to you, ma'am.
Yes.
That I'm little bit of doubtful or understanding this. That could we relate? Can you hear me?
Not hear you? Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead. I can hear you.
Ma'am, my question is to you that.
Yes.
Yeah. So could we associate same labor, same payment with feminism? And the second question that most of the literary work we just saw that the male protagonist got fame, like Tom Jones and so many. So could we also relate this incidents to feminism?
this is what feminism, I said, was trying to do. Feminism was trying to reread, texts from the past, in order to inquire the gender values of those texts, in order to find out what kind of a gender ideology do they have, what kind of a gender equation do they have, do they treat men and women as, as alike, as same, as equal? If they do not treat them as equal, where is the difference? So yes, this is an important arena of feminist criticism, that it tries to read work, uh, it tries to read things in the light of the idea of gender, कि जेंडर इक्वालिटी है या नहीं है तो क्यों नहीं है, और किस नेचर की इक्वालिटी नहीं है, अगर नहीं है तो किस नेचर की इक्वालिटी है जो नहीं है, इनइक्वालिटी की क्या क्या रीजंस हो सकती हैं, व्हाट आर द वेरियस रीजंस, एंड हाउ कैन वी kind of re-establish a new kind of framework for reading old texts. So yes, feminism is doing this, and as you said that equal pay for equal work, yes, feminism is also doing this. It is talking, it is drawing attention to equality. So we have the employment acts have been changed, है ना. तो अब जो है वो यूनाइटेड नेशंस की तरफ से ये स्टेप लिया गया था, एंड यू हैव नाउ दैट सेम पे फॉर सेम वर्क, जो कि अभी भी लागू होता नहीं है. अगर आप जो है इफ यू लुक एट द अनऑर्गेनाइज्ड लेबर सेक्टर, है ना, जो अनऑर्गेनाइज्ड लेबर सेक्टर है, बाकी जो ऑर्गेनाइज्ड लेबर सेक्टर है, फॉर एग्जांपल हम लोग तो उसमें हम लोग इस तरह से प्रॉब्लम्स नहीं देखते हैं, बट जो अनऑर्गेनाइज्ड लेबर सेक्टर है वहाँ पर आप देखोगे कि वेजेस वेरी करते हैं जेंडर वाइज. तो जो रेजा कुली है फॉर एग्जांपल, आप देखोगे कि जो रेजा है, शी इज डूइंग द सेम वर्क, परहैप्स मोर वर्क देन हर मेल काउंटर पार्ट, बट एट द टाइम ऑफ गेटिंग पेड, शी इज गेटिंग पेड लेस, क्योंकि ये अज्यूम किया जा रहा है कि वो उतना नहीं की होगी जितना कि वो किया होगा. तो अनऑर्गेनाइज्ड सेक्टर में अभी भी हम देखते हैं कि जेंडर बायस है पेमेंट ऑफ वेजेस में, एंड विमेन गेट लेसर वेजेस फॉर द सेम वर्क. तो अभी भी हम इसको एलिमिनेट नहीं कर पाए हैं, लेकिन हाँ, पॉलिसीज बनी है, एंड ये पॉलिसीज फेमिनिस्ट इंटरवेंशन की वजह से ही बनी है. यस yes, Meherzabeen, do I satisfy you?
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Totally agree. Thank you.
Do we have other questions? Do we have other questions on this, or do we move ahead? If we move ahead, we are going towards post-colonial criticism. I need a yes from you if we have no more questions.
Yes, ma'am. We don't have questions.
Right. Okay, fine. So, the third thing that we said that we would be talking about would be post-colonial criticism. And in post-colonial criticism, it is not, again, as I said, बहुत कुछ नहीं या बहुत difficult बात नहीं है. We are talking about a time, we are looking, for example, हम लोगों ने जब Marxism देखा तो हम लोगों ने चीज़ों को जो है class perspective से समझने की कोशिश करी. Again, when we looked at feminism, we are trying to analyze things from a gender perspective. When we look at post-colonialism, we are trying to analyze things from the perspective of race. Okay, रेस के पर्सपेक्टिव से. क्यों? हालांकि अभी पोस्ट कोलोनियलिज्म में जो है हम लोग एक नियो कोलोनियलिज्म की भी बात करते हैं, जिस पर आई विल कम लेटर, बट उस नियो कोलोनियलिज्म में रेस फीचर नहीं करता है. सो पोस्ट कोलोनियलिज्म बिगैन विद अ फोकस ऑन रेस, बट इट हैज एंडेड अप विद अ फोकस ऑन पावर एज सच. ठीक है. So how did post-colonialism come up? Now, of course, post is always after, है ना. तो post-colonialism means after colonialism. तो आफ्टर colonialism जाहिर है colonialism में जो हुआ उसके बाद ही after colonialism होता है. So what happened during the colonial period? All of us know that we were colonized, है ना. colonialism है क्या? colonialism is the wielding of political power over over a geographical territory by another state, है ना. एक state जो जब एक दूसरी geographical territory को annex कर लेता है और उस पर एक political command establish कर लेता है, तो हम कहते हैं कि वो उसको colonize कर चुका है ना. So to colonize is to acquire political power and political leadership over a group of people. So if you look at the history of colonialism, तो European countries में बहुत सारी ही countries रही हैं जिनकी imperialist missions थे, जिनकी colonizing missions थी. आपस में वो लोग भी जो है एक दूसरे को colonize कर चुके हैं in the past. Yes, just like India and the Britishers. Yes. So फॉर एग्जांपल अगर हम खुद इंग्लैंड को देखें तो इंग्लैंड खुद जो है वो पहले एक फ्रेंच कॉलोनी हुआ करता था. इंग्लैंड की खुद की ऑफिशियल लैंग्वेज अगर आप 14th सेंचुरी इंग्लिश लिटरेचर को पढ़ेंगे तो आप देखेंगे कि 14th सेंचुरी में जेफरी चॉसर नाम का एक आदमी पहली बार इंग्लिश में लिख रहा है, जबकि जो स्टेट लैंग्वेज थी, जो ऑफिशियल लैंग्वेज थी, वो फ्रेंच थी. सो वी नो ऑफ अ टाइम व्हेन दीज यूरोपियन पावर्स वर आल्सो were also colonized by their friends and neighbors. But particularly when we talk of post-colonialism, we are talking of a response to the historically most powerful colonial movement that was certainly set up by the British Empire. तो जब हम ब्रिटिश एम्पायर की बात करते हैं, वी नो दैट द ब्रिटिश एम्पायर वाज सो वास्ट दैट द सन इज सेड टू हैव नेवर सेट ऑन द ब्रिटिश एम्पायर. राइट, तो वो इतना बड़ा था कि कभी वहां सूरज डूबता नहीं था, बिकॉज इतना बड़ा था कि कहीं अगर सूरज डूबेगा तो कहीं जो है सूरज उगेगा भी. सो एवरी टाइम you realize, you look at the map of the world and you realize कि कितना ज़्यादा extent था ब्रिटिश रूल का फ्रॉम वन कॉर्नर ऑफ द ग्लोब टू अनदर, किस एक्सटेंट तक ब्रिटिशर्स ने कॉलोनाइज किया था. सिर्फ इंडिया ही कॉलोनाइज्ड हुआ था ऐसा नहीं है ना. देयर वर अदर कंट्रीज आल्सो व्हिच वर कॉलोनाइज्ड. यू हैड अफ्रीका बीइंग कॉलोनाइज्ड आल्सो, and so many other countries across the world which had been colonies, है ना. USA जो था वो खुद एक कॉलोनी था इंग्लैंड का काफी जमाने तक. तो colonization जो है is not only about it is not only about race. Same race, for example, Ireland, है ना. The Irish people are also white people. Okay, they belong to a different cultural stock, but they are also whites. And England colonized Ireland also. As I said, even America was a colony of England, of Great Britain. तो colonization हमेशा ही रेस पर डिपेंड करता है ऐसा नहीं है, but the racial difference played a very important part in the colonization that England did, particularly in the third world. ये जो third world countries थे, countries like Asia and Africa, तो यहाँ पर colonization का एक बहुत important logic बन गया ये racial discrimination, ये racial difference अगर हम कहें. So you had, of course, we were black-skinned people and they were white-skinned people, and there was an idea that prevailed that they are superior to us. They are superior to us because they are, of course, the European race as such, is superior to the other races. So they kind of set up a binary between, them and us. So they were everything good, and we as the binary opposite were everything bad. Okay. So they are white people, and therefore they are intellectual people, and therefore they are rational people, and therefore, they have a sense of history, they have a sense of culture, they have a sense of civilization. We, on the other hand, we are black-skinned people or dark-skinned people, and therefore we are not at all cultured, we are uncivilized, we are barbarians, we are uncouth, unpolished, raw, we have no sense of history, we have no sense of culture, no sense of civilization. तो एक इस तरीके की जो है थियरी उन लोगों ने कंस्ट्रक्ट की जिसमें कि हम लोग बस बुरे बुरे थे और वो लोग बस अच्छे अच्छे थे. एंड दिस kind of offered them a logic for dominating us. तो उनको लगा कि भाई because वो इतने अच्छे हैं and उनको ऊपर वाले ने इतना अच्छा बनाया है, so they kind of owe this duty, to help us also become better people and to civilize us also. So it becomes a kind of duty for the white man to civilize the black man or the dark-skinned man. And in order to civilize us, of course, they have to rule over us. क्या करेंगे बेचारे, उनकी मजबूरी है ना. So they are given this burden of ruling over us because they want to civilize us. So the entire idea behind colonization was not the idea of acquiring political power or the idea of acquiring economic power through political power. ये सब कहीं नहीं आता है पूरे डिस्कशन में. डिस्कशन में बात यही आती है कि they are very good people and they are very gifted people, and we are naturally at a disadvantage because of who we are. because we are black and we have no sense of history and we have no sense of culture. Therefore, it is their duty to help us become civilized. And of course, in order to civilize us, they will have to rule over us. And rule करने में तो फिर जो बाकी चीजें होंगी सो तो होंगी. So this was a kind of idea that colonialism generated. And it was a systematic effort, in all colonies, that not only did they attempt to politically rule over us, but they did this, they achieved this political rule by kind of wiping out our psychological sense of identity. तो कहीं ना कहीं colonization ने not only politically colonize किया, but उन्होंने हम लोगों को जो है psychologically भी colonize किया. And it is both went hand in hand. ये political और economic colonization went hand in hand with the psychological colonization. Because अगर हम खुद को weak नहीं मानेंगे तो फिर तो हम protest करेंगे. If I feel that I am equally good, even if I am not better, if I feel that I am equally good, I will obviously protest against being treated as of secondary value. तो अगर हमको feel होगा कि हम अच्छे हैं तो हम I will not settle for anything less than that. But once if I am told that हम अच्छे नहीं हैं और ये बता के अगर मेरे दिमाग में घुसा दिया जाए कि हम बिल्कुल अच्छे नहीं हैं, तो फिर मेरे साथ कुछ भी हो जाए, शायद हम I will not be able to raise my voice and make a statement for myself, because I will keep on feeling that हम तो बुरे हैं and therefore I deserve what is happening to me. Okay, so this colonization went hand in hand with the idea of a weakening of your psychological sense of identity. So in the process of colonizing, what the colonizers did was not only that they colonized our geography, and they colonized our demography, our people, they colonized our resources, they colonized also our minds, they colonized our culture, they colonized our modes of knowledge. हम लोगों की जो epistemology थी, हम किस तरह से चीजों को देखते समझते थे, उसको भी कॉलोनाइज कर लिया और बताया कि ये जो तुम कर रहे हो ये गलत है, ये जो तुम समझ रहे हो ये गलत है, तुम जो हो तुम ये हो. And they offered us through their academic practices, they offered us a discourse about ourselves. They told us who you are, and we were silly enough, and we remain in various ways silly enough today also, to accept whatever they have told us about ourselves. Right. So colonization, you see, was a very complex process. It was not just as simple as one nation ruling over another. So the worst legacy of this colonization has been the psychological colonization that we had become subject to. तो colonization तो जब anti-colonial movement start होता है, colonize तो हम लोग हो गए है ना, और काफी जमाने तक colonized रहे, but at the same time it is to our credit that we were never content with this colonization. हम लोग हमेशा, if you look into our history, you realize that we have never been content with being colonized. There have always been voices which have been raised, and there have always been revolts or rebellions which have taken place in some part of the country or the other. हमेशा ऐसे groups रहे हैं who have disagreed with the logic of the colonizers. So it is to our kind of grace that we have never been content with what we received. But still you realize that जब anti-colonial movement start हुआ, जब protest start हुआ, तो ये protest तब तक successful नहीं हो पाया जब तक कि it was not associated with a psychological and a cultural reclaiming of the self. हम तब तक ब्रिटिशर्स को ओवरथ्रो नहीं कर पाए जब तक हम खुद से कनेक्टेड नहीं हो पाए, because कहीं ना कहीं they had eroded our sense of identity, they had eroded our concept of who we were. तो अगर आप ब्रिटिश स्कॉलरशिप को स्टडी कीजिएगा in the earlier part of the colonial period, तो आप देखेंगे कि ब्रिटिशर्स ने कैसे वन बाय वन हमारे कल्चर को टारगेट किया एंड किस तरह से हमारे कल्चर को ग्रेजुअली चेंज कर दिया. So all the things that we are facing today, most of the problems that we are facing today in our country, ये जो बड़ा प्रॉब्लम है हमारे यहाँ हार्मनी का प्रॉब्लम, बिकॉज हमारे यहाँ डाइवर्सिटी बहुत है, हमारे यहाँ रिलीजियस डाइवर्सिटी है, हमारे यहाँ लिंग्विस्टिक डाइवर्सिटी है, हमारे यहाँ कल्चरल डाइवर्सिटी है. तो इतने लेवल्स पर जो हमारे यहाँ डाइवर्सिटी है, ये डाइवर्सिटी को एकोमोडेट करने का जो प्रॉब्लम रहा है वो शुरू से ही रहा है. देयर हैज ऑलवेज बीन a problem in accommodating everyone, but that problem seems to have worsened as a result of colonialism. तो इनकी जो डिवाइड एंड रूल वाली पॉलिसी थी कि पर्टिकुलर सेक्शंस में हमको बांट दिया जाए, पर्टिकुलर स्मॉल आइडेंटिटीज में हमको बांट दिया जाए, और फिर उनको ब्लॉक्स बनाकर उनको अपीज करने के लिए, उनको खुश करने के लिए कुछ 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 दे दिया जाए. तो इससे क्या हुआ कि हम लोगों के बीच की जो हार्मनी है वो कहीं ना कहीं ब्रेक हो गई. सो यू रियलाइज दैट व्हाटएवर इज हैपनिंग with the tribals today, or whatever is happening with the minority religious communities today, kahin na kahin all of them stem from the colonial practices that had been a part of the governance of this nation for a long period of time when the Britishers were here. और उनके जाने के बाद भी हम तुरंत इन practices को overthrow नहीं कर पाए, या हम तुरंत इन practices को replace नहीं कर पाए. So somehow at some level or the other they kept on getting replicated, and इस replication का नतीजा है कि आज हमको diversity accommodate करने में इतनी दिक्कत हो रही है. And it is not just about accommodating diversity, but on a host of levels, you realize that most of the problems that as a nation we are carrying today are problems which stem, from our colonial encounter. ये colonial encounter अगर नहीं हुआ होता तो शायद हमारी इकोनॉमी की भी इतनी प्रॉब्लम्स नहीं होती, और हमारे जो यहाँ पर कल्चरल भी इतने सारे इश्यूज हैं वो भी नहीं होते. कहीं ना कहीं we would have we were making a steady progress. We had absorbed so many so many invaders and so many waves of attacks. So शायद हम इसको भी absorb कर लेते अगर ये policy इनकी इतनी targeted नहीं होती about eroding our identity. So what they tried to erode our sense of self by establishing us, as a different group of people in their discourse about us. So post-colonialism is about the act of questioning this this colonial encounter for its critical or making critical inquiry on this colonial encounter. तो पोस्ट कोलोनियलिज्म क्या करता है? पोस्ट कोलोनियलिज्म ये मानता है कि कोलोनाइजेशन के पूरे प्रोसेस में जो है हम लोगों ने बहुत कुछ सफ़र किया है. अपार्ट फ्रॉम द पॉलिटिकल एंड इकोनॉमिक लॉसेस दैट वी हैव अंडरगॉन, हम लोगों ने ग्रेटली जो है कल्चरल लॉसेस अंडरगो किया है. हम लोगों ने ग्रेटली इरोजन ऑफ आइडेंटिटी को अंडरगो किया है. हम लोगों ने एक क्राइसिस अंडरगो किया है जिसमें कि हम जो है we are separated from what and who we are, and we are given a different version of what we are supposed to be in the eyes of the colonizer, और हम लोगों ने जो है उस वर्जन को अडॉप्ट कर लिया है विदाउट क्वेश्चनिंग. हम लोगों ने उस वर्जन को अडॉप्ट कर लिया है कि हाँ हम ऐसे ही हैं. तो ब्रिटिशर्स ने कहा कि भाई हम लोग बहुत इनटॉलरेंट हैं और हम लोग आपस में लड़ते रहते हैं, लोगों ने जो है उसको अडॉप्ट कर लिया कि हाँ हम लोग तो बहुत इंटॉलरेंट हैं, हम लोग तो बहुत जो है कट्टर रहेंगे. सो लॉजिकली अटेम्प्टेड टू डोमिनेट अस. सो पोस्ट colonialism is a questioning of these structures which prevail in our society. They prevail in our writing, and post colonialism implies a writing back. एक मसला पोस्ट colonialism के साथ एसोसिएटेड ये भी है, वो है लैंग्वेज का. Now we know that English जो थी वो किसी भी कॉलोनी की नेटिव लैंग्वेज नहीं थी. As far as India is concerned, हमारे यहाँ तो लैंग्वेजेस की कोई कमी नहीं है. We have so many languages, and we know that कितनी पॉलिटिक्स हुई थी जब हम लोग को ऑफिशियल लैंग्वेज चूज करना था. एंड हिंदी और उर्दू में तो कितना माइनर सा वोट्स का फर्क था एट द टाइम व्हेन इट वाज डिसाइडेड. सो मतलब किसी भी कॉलोनी की there was no colony whose native language was English, and this was a language which the colonizers brought along with them, and this was a language which we were kind of there were temptations given to us to use this language. Some of us of course embraced it voluntarily. Some of us also knew it beforehand क्योंकि हमारे बहुत सारे जो थे elites और intellectuals वो बाहर पढ़े हुए थे, तो they already were well versed in the language. And then यहाँ पर इस language को शुरू भी किया गया so that the British would be able to have more and more people to help them in the administration. and they would have people speaking their language. तो इस perspective से जो है यहाँ पर मिशनरी स्कूल स्टार्ट किए गए, इंग्लिश मीडियम स्कूल स्टार्ट किए गए. सो पोस्ट कोलोनियलिज्म की ही देन है ये इंग्लिश लैंग्वेज जो हमारे पास आज है. And post-colonialism में language का ये एक important, it is a kind of writing back of the colonial language. So post-colonialism experiments with language. Post-colonialism says that fine, this English language that I have, has come to me via you. It has come to me through you, through the colonizer. But now it is my language. Because I have grown up, I have been brought up in this language. I have grown up speaking it, hearing it, writing it. And now when I'm using the language, I am a competent, I claim to be a competent user of the language. And I also, because this is my language, I have the liberty of using it in any way that I choose. So post-colonialism is also about the multiplicity of Englishes. तो हम एक इंग्लिश की बात नहीं कर सकते. एक क्वींस इंग्लिश जो कि ब्रिटिशर्स यहाँ छोड़ गए थे, अब पोस्ट कोलोनियलिज्म में that one English is not tenable. We are talking about Englishes because every colony has used the English which was left with it in its own way, and it has come up with new and innovative ways of writing and using and experimenting with the English language. So you have Indian English. India में जिस तरह की English बोली जाती है is the Indian English, and then you have Caribbean English, and then you of course have American English जो कि अभी जिसको ज़्यादा power मिला हुआ है क्योंकि सुपर पावर अमेरिका है. तो therefore ये भी कोलोनाइजेशन का ही दौर है जब हमारा जो गूगल और माइक्रोसॉफ्ट का सॉफ्टवेयर है वो हमारी ब्रिटिश स्पेलिंग्स को जो है दिखाता है कि गलत है ना. It marks out our British spellings, and if we want approval from the computer and the software, we will have to use American spellings. So ये Facebook for example, वहाँ भी when you type something in British spellings वो आपको underline करके दिखा देगा कि this is erroneous, और अगर आप उसको auto correct दे देंगे तो it will convert all spellings into American US. So you have today, in the post-colonial world, you have a multiplicity of Englishes. So there is no one fixed way of using the English language, and post-colonial writers, they take liberty with the language in various ways. So for example, you have Salman Rushdie's very famous, Midnight's Children, where he gives us the metaphor of the chutney. He says that as a post-colonial, my aim is to chutneyfy, history and language. So what is a chutney? A chutney is a thing in which many ingredients come together. It's like a khichdi, isn't it? So you have tomatoes, and you have amawat, and you have khajur, dates, kishmish, raisins. So you have so many things getting into the chutney, and all the things, they are mixed together so that the flavor is altered at the end. So it is a mixture. It's a cocktail kind of a thing that post-colonial writers aim to do with history and language. So post-colonialism is about, it is about questioning the structures of colonialism. It is about questioning the colonial mindset. तो ये जो colonizers थे एक binary बना ली है ना. So Edward Said in his very famous text Orientalism, he talks about this, that colonial thinking जो है वो binaries के form में work करती है. Now binary means an opposite. ठीक है, तो colonizer ये समझता है कि it is a case of us versus them, and the us is the white man versus the black man. You have Frantz Fanon's very famous work, white skins, black masks, black skins, white masks, क्या है, right? You have heard of the work? So you have where he's talking about this, that the mask that we are required to put on is the mask of the white man. So we are supposed to behave in public, using the white man's language, using his standards of politeness, of decorum. So we are supposed to be putting on a white mask, but even this white mask cannot shed the idea that we after all have black skins, and we will always be counted and regarded as inferior by the ruling class. So post-colonialism is questioning this structure of binary thinking, which was a part of the colonial mindset. It is a case of black versus white, and black will stand for everything bad and the white will stand for everything good. So if the good is if the white is good, black is evil. If the white is cultured, the black is the uncouth. If the white is polished, civilized, the black is the barbarian. So इस तरह की binary thinking को challenge करता है post colonialism. Post colonialism also questions the idea of identity, कि identity क्या है, you realize that in anti-colonial पर प्राइड होना चाहिए एंड हम अपने देश की रिसोर्सेज को यूज करेंगे. एंड देन यू हैव द आइडिया ऑफ रिवाइवलिज्म, द रिवाइवल ऑफ इंडियन कल्चर, कि ये जो उन लोगों ने हमसे कहा कि भाई आपका तो कोई हिस्ट्री नहीं है, आपका तो कोई कल्चर ही नहीं है, आप तो बारबेरियंस हैं, you have no sense of historicity. So the idea that we have to explore our own native traditions. So you look at all the people, all the important intellectuals of the period, be it Gandhi, be it Tagore, be it Raja Ram Mohan Roy, be it you have Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. So all of them, all of these intellectuals are asking us to go back to our roots. They're asking us to have pride in our own culture, in our own history, as citizens of India, or as people living in India, as Indians. तो ये जो sense of identity हम लोगों में फिर से reinstill किया जाता है. We realize that freedom comes after we have psychologically overcome the colonial attack on our identity. जब हम इसको psychologically overcome कर पाते हैं, उसके बाद ही हम इसको physically और politically overcome कर पाते हैं, right? So post-colonialism is talking about the idea of identity. It is asking us to look critically at the discourses which prevailed during the colonial period. It is also asserting its independence to use English in a way that it chooses to use it. So for example, you look at Mulk Raj Anand, who was one of the earliest Indian English novelists, and you look at the kind of language that he's using. He's literally translating all the proverbs and phrases that we have in our Indian languages into English. So you will find very strange and very funny, oftentimes very funny constructions that Mulk Raj Anand is coming up with. So for example, हम लोग बहुत commonly बोलते हैं जाओ मरो, है ना? So he will say that go die, है ना? It seems so funny to us at this point of time कि ऐसा उन्होंने क्यों लिखा, but he had no option, with the kind of political commitment that he had made to writing. He had to bring in a vocabulary which would be authentic to the country, to the culture from which he was coming. So he had to kind of find ways to reconcile. अभी तो English बहुत बोला जाता है, and you will find that rickshawalas and autowalas and our maids also. They know many terms in English. In fact, they know so many terms in English that if you ask them the translation for those terms, they will probably not be able to give you the term in Hindi or in their own languages. They will be able to talk about it in English only. For example, everybody knows please, everybody knows sorry, everybody knows thank you. You ask them to give you a native translation of please और सॉरी, तो वो नहीं दे पाएंगे. तो ऐसे बहुत सारे वर्ड्स हैं जो हमारे जो अब हमारे एकदम ग्रास रूट्स तक चले गए हैं इन द इंग्लिश लैंग्वेज. तो दैट इज हाउ वी आर काइंड ऑफ टेकिंग ओवर द इंग्लिश from the Britishers, और हम लोग तो बहुत extent तक take over कर चुके हैं. But you look at the earlier writers who were writing, and they found it very difficult to express their sensibilities in a language which was as different from their culture as English. So this is what they did. They experimented, and it is perhaps of the diverse experimentations that took place that we have come up to this level that we can claim that Indian English writing is a distinct part of world writing. एक डिस्टिंक्ट प्लेस है, हमारे राइटर्स को इम्पोर्टेंट अवार्ड्स मिलते हैं, और वी हैव क्रिएटेड रिपल्स इन द सिनेरियो ऑफ वर्ल्ड लिटरेचर, राइट? So post-colonialism is, as I said, questioning power structures which were established by colonial practice. It is about questioning the purity of language. हम लोग कहते हैं कि नहीं, लैंग्वेज प्योर नहीं है, और homogeneous बिल्कुल नहीं है, and we can break and twist it in our own ways. It is also about questioning the authority of culture, कि किस culture को ज़्यादा authority है interpret करने की या decide करने की कि क्या सही है क्या गलत है. And we realize that post-colonialism says that किसी culture को authority नहीं है. All cultures are equally valid, all are equally acceptable, और इस बात को हम जितना जल्दी समझ लें हमारे लिए उतना अच्छा होगा. We have no right to, criticize cultural practices of people whom we do not understand, right? Whom we do not know. So everything has a place in their culture. So it is about fostering respect, equality for all cultures, for all races, for all modes of understanding and all modes of knowledge. This, in a nutshell, was, post-colonial criticism. So if you have any questions on these, you are free to ask them. So with this, I think
Yes, ma'am.
we have, yes, I take up your question. So I think with this, we have, come to an end of the survey that we were doing. We began with Plato and we ended at, post-colonial criticism, और इसके बीच में ही आपका पूरा syllabus है. So from the next class onwards, we will go back and, we will begin with important critics, जिनको कि हम लोगों ने अभी इन 4-5 लेक्चर्स में डिटेल्स में डिस्कस नहीं किया है. We will go back and we will begin with those critics. So in the next class, that is tomorrow, I will go back to unit 1, that is your unit 2, I think, block 2, that is classical criticism, है ना? So in the next class, that is tomorrow, we will be discussing classical criticism, जो आपके portion में है. ठीक है? So we have come to an end of the survey that we were doing, the introductory survey, and in the next class we will go to block 2, which is classical criticism. Yes, now you can come forward with your questions.
Yes, ma'am. Myself, Vishal, ma'am. And
Yes.
my question is that as you mentioned that, and we also knowing that the Britishers are ruled over 200 years on India, and they colonize with as well physically as well as psychologically, and
Yes.
they forced to adapt their culture and their thoughts which they have mentioned about us. Then how can we contribute for the development our own English sites as well as the education uh, to develop in our country and across the country as well, across the world?
This has been going on. This has been going on. We have tried to break free of the British supremacy. We have tried to break free. हम लोग कुछ लोग तो कुछ extent तक indigenous होने की कोशिश करते हैं, है ना? अभी तो indigeneity is a very popular word. अभी तो रामदेव बाबा is always telling us ये करो वो करो, don't go in for Western medicines, don't go in for Western makeup. Patanjali is even supposed to be coming up with a clothing line, है ना? वो jeans weans भी बनाने वाले हैं अब आगे चल के. So they are marketing, they are using the word indigeneity as a kind of brand label कि हम सब कुछ जो है indigenous है, home grown है, और हम अपने घर की चीज़ें इस्तेमाल करते हैं. So they are selling us aloe vera juice and amla juice and God knows what, and all these things. They say that this is a native tradition, which is kind of a challenge to Western modes of knowledge, है ना? So there are people who are free to agree with this, free to go on with this, free to तो ऐसा नहीं है कि we are not trying. We are trying on our own levels. Indigeneity is also selling. So you have Patanjali ने इतना पैसा जो है वो इसी से कमा लिया है. It's one of the largest business groups in the country, and it has earned a lot of money by selling, by encashing upon this idea of indigeneity. Similarly, indigenous education, हालांकि अब तो hardly ही शायद parents बच्चों को हिंदी मीडियम या बंगाली मीडियम या उड़िया मीडियम या उर्दू मीडियम स्कूल्स में पढ़ाते हैं. Mostly people go in for English medium schools, है ना? लेकिन ये ऑप्शन है, एग्जिस्ट तो करता है. There are minority languages के schools exist करते हैं अभी भी. If you want, you can get your children to study there, जो कि लोग करते नहीं हैं, right? So we try in our own ways to shake this structure off. लेकिन देखो, what we realize is that post-colonialism has given way to what I was telling you, to a new concept which is known as neocolonialism. अब neocolonialism में क्या हो रहा है? मतलब colonialism में क्या हो रहा था कि बाहर के लोग आकर हम लोगों पर जो है पावर अपना एस्टैब्लिश कर रहे थे, है ना? तो ये कॉलोनियलिज्म था, जब दूसरे जगह से लोग आए और हमारे ऊपर उन लोगों ने जो है पावर एस्टैब्लिश किया, और तब हम लोगों ने प्रोटेस्ट किया कि भाई तुम लोग कौन होते हो टू डोमिनेट एंड कोलोनाइज अस लाइक दिस. बट नाउ न्यू कॉलोनियलिज्म एरा में वी सी दैट हम लोगों के खुद के लोग जो हैं वो हम लोगों पर हावी होकर सिमिलर पावर स्ट्रक्चर्स एस्टैब्लिश कर रहे हैं जैसा कि हमारे कोलोनाइजर्स ने किया था. सो वो ब्रिटिशर्स थे, तो हम लोगों को एक तुरंत जो है हम लोग जाग उठे एंड वी सेड दैट दिस शुड नॉट बी डन. बट व्हेन आवर ओन पीपल आर डूइंग इट ऑन अस फॉर अ मेजर टू द मेजर सेक्शन ऑफ द पॉपुलेशन, इट इज नॉट परसेप्टेबल, लोगों को नजर नहीं आ रहा है. तो कैपिटलिज्म अभी क्या कर रहा है? कैपिटलिज्म तो यही कर रहा है ना हमारे साथ. कैपिटलिस्ट्स जो हैं, जो कैपिटलिस्टिक क्लास है, वो तो हमारे ही बीच के लोग हैं ना, जो हमारे ही बीच के लोग हैं, हमारे ही रेस के लोग हैं, हमारे ही कल्चरल स्टॉक के लोग हैं, जो हमारे ऊपर हावी हो रहे हैं, एंड दे आर वर्किंग टू आवर डेट्रीमेंट. They are building a similar set of structures which had been set up by the colonizers. So this is a process which is known as neocolonialism. Neo is a word which means new. So new तरीके से हम लोग colonized हो रहे हैं by the structures of the past, only that the colonizers here are different. तो यहाँ पर कोलोनाइजर्स जो हैं वो बाहर के लोग नहीं हैं, वो हमारे ही बीच के लोग हैं. तो फिर ऐसे केस में हम इन लोगों से कैसे बचें, हम इन लोगों को कैसे आइडेंटिफाई करें और इनके अगेंस्ट में हम किस तरह का स्ट्रगल लॉन्च करें, राइट? So it is not as if that we need to save our country only from western influences या from outside influences. अभी तो ऐसा कुछ बचा नहीं जो कि प्योर ईस्टर्न हो या प्योर वेस्टर्न हो, है ना. सब जगह सब कुछ मिक्स्ड हो गया है. सो फॉर एग्जांपल, अगर हम कहते हैं कि योगा, जो हम लोग वर्ल्ड योगा डे सेलिब्रेट कर रहे हैं, और हम कहते हैं कि ये हमारे यहाँ से आया, तो पतंजलि का जो है योग वहाँ से आया, तो अब हम देखते हैं कि योगा जो हमारे पास अभी वापस आ रहा है, इट इज नॉट द पतंजलि योगा दैट इज कमिंग बैक टू अस. इट इज कमिंग बैक टू अस मीडिएटेड बाय सो मेनी कल्चर्स. तो चाइनीज और जापान और चाइना और कोरिया, है ना, और यूएस और फलाना ठिकाना, सब जगह से योग और योगा वाले प्रोडक्ट्स घूम फिर के अब हमारे पास आ रहे हैं. तो हम कैसे क्लेम कर सकते हैं कि ये हमारा है? क्योंकि जो हमको ये मिल रहा है, it is coming, it has traveled through a host of cultures and it is coming back to us. तो जो हम जिन मैट्स पर हम बैठकर बड़े शान से योगा करते हैं, those mats are China made, है ना, वो चाइनीज बनाते हैं वो योगा मैट्स, और वो उनको तो हम लोग बॉयकॉट नहीं कर रहे हैं, हम लोग तो उन पर शान से बैठकर आज सब वर्ल्ड योगा डे सेलिब्रेट कर रहे हैं. तो जो बहुत सारे लोग अपने घरों में प्रोडक्ट्स रखते हैं, दे सपोज टू बी, फॉर एग्जांपल जो मंडलास हैं, है ना, जो योग मंडलास हैं, तो वो सारे भी तो जापान और कोरिया से आ रहे हैं. सो द पॉइंट इज देयर इज नथिंग व्हिच इज व्हिच इज प्योर टुडे. सो वी कैन नॉट से कि ये ईस्टर्न है या ये वेस्टर्न है. आजकल सब कुछ ग्लोबलाइजेशन में सब कुछ मिक्स्ड हो गया है. सो इन दैट केस हमको नहीं लगता है कि हम लोगों को ये जानने की जरूरत है कि हम लोग अपने कल्चर को कैसे प्रोटेक्ट करें. बट अभी न्यू कॉलोनियलिज्म में हम लोगों को ये सोचना तो पड़ेगा कि इस कैपिटलिज्म ईटिंग अवे इनटू स्मॉलर कल्चर्स. हम लोग सब चीज को, अभी कोरोना की वजह से देयर इज अ ब्रेक, बट अदरवाइज तो मोर और लेस सबकी लाइफस्टाइल सेम थी. वी यूज्ड टू ईट बाहर का खाना, जो है टेक अवे फूड्स जो हम लोग खाते थे, और जो हम लोग रेडी टू वेयर क्लोथिंग पहनते हैं. तो एक काइंड ऑफ होमोजेनाइजेशन आ गया है एज अ रिजल्ट ऑफ कैपिटलिस्ट प्रैक्टिसेस. सो दीज आर द थिंग्स दैट वी हैव टू टॉक अबाउट. वी हैव टू फाइंड आउट how we can maintain an equitable society में जितने सारे लोग हैं सबको अपना ड्यू मिल पाए, ऐसी एक सिनेरियो हम लोग कैसे क्रिएट कर सकते हैं, राइट?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Do we have other questions?
Then as a student,
Yes.
ma'am, I would like to just last thing.
Yes.
Ma'am, as we know that as a student of MA and we are also the future of our country, then ma'am,
Yes.
how can we promote our languages, our English as well as our culture among the children to
See, the first thing, this is a general
be the
question
part
which I
of
think is not
themselves.
very related to the syllabus, but then I think one general way that we should begin with is we should begin first by honoring, है ना. सबसे बड़ी चीज जो हम लोगों को खुद भी करना चाहिए एंड जो सिखाना भी चाहिए टू द यंगर जनरेशन इज टू ऑनर every culture and every language and every religion for in and for what it is, है ना. So only when people are secure कि हाँ, मतलब हमको इस चीज से कोई खतरा नहीं है कि हम कौन हैं, है ना. Once there is a security on grounds of identity, then only can a dialogue or a discourse flourish. तो सबसे पहले तो वो सिक्योरिटी क्रिएट करना सबके लिए बाय ऑनरिंग एंड रिस्पेक्टिंग एवरीबडी. द मोमेंट वी ट्राई टू डिस्क्रिमिनेट अगेंस्ट पीपल ऑन ग्राउंड्स ऑफ दिस एंड दैट, तो फिर वो जो है वो एक इनसिक्योरिटी क्रिएट करता है जो कि किसी नेशन स्टेट के लिए किसी भी ग्रुप के लिए अच्छा नहीं है. सो आई थिंक दैट अपनी कल्चर को प्रमोट करना तो अगर वो कल्चर वर्थ प्रमोटिंग होगा, अगर उसमें अच्छी चीजें होंगी तो लोग ऑटोमेटिकली उसको अपनाएंगे. तो हमको प्रमोट करने से जरूरत है कि अपने कल्चर को अच्छे से उसके बेस्ट प्रिंसिपल्स को प्रैक्टिस करना. So if I am practicing the best principles of my culture and if I am doing it really well, then that will attract people. तो प्रमोट करने के लिए ऐसा आई नीड नॉट गो आउट टू डू एनी प्रोपागेंडा, बट हम अपने उसको अपनी लाइफ में प्रैक्टिस करके और उससे सोसाइटी में पॉजिटिव चेंजेस लाके शायद हम लोगों को इंस्पायर कर सकते हैं कि मोर ऑफ यू कैन टेक अप माय पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू एंड डू थिंग्स लाइक दिस, है ना?
Yes, ma'am. It's all.
Yes.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Okay, so I think we have no more questions. Also, it is already 5 o'clock, so we will call it a day here. And I will just remind you that tomorrow, same time, 3:30, we are meeting again, and we will be talking about your block 2, that is classical criticism, right? So, एक बार एक झलक देख लेना. Questions है तो keep your questions ready because I have introduced Plato and Aristotle to you. Please go through whatever is there in that block, and you can then bring up your questions which we will discuss. Okay, thank you so much. See you tomorrow.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yes.